I figured I'd go down a nerd tangent as a form of fun escapism. At one point, I jokingly referred to myself as Elvish pagan in my life, as I tried to live by a philosophy I thought would be needed to be held by one of Tolkien's elves. First off, elfish religion is incredibly simple. It's 100% evidence-based. Iluvatar, a monotheistic all-powerful god being, created the Valar, a collection of 14 gods essentially, and the Maiar, somewhat lesser powerful gods, among which includes Balrog, Sauron, and the wizards. The Valar created and designed the earth, every elf knows they exist, and Morgoth, an evil Maiar of equal power with the Valar, wants nothing more than destruction and power, and they have physically battled him and his forces. It is possible that there could be elves agnostic about Iluvatar, as they have only had the Valar's word to go on, but it's highly unlikely. When they die, they will live in the halls of Mandos for as long as it takes for them to heal emotionally and rest from the weariness of living, to either be reborn or released anew to the world. A perfect mix of monotheism and Hinduism. Elvish philosophy would be a lot more complex and is not actually discussed in the books. This kind of philosophy needed is a lot different from the philosophy needed to be a mortal human. Most human philosophies, especially applied philosophies, revolve around dealing with and coping with death. We are also never given an operating manual by higher beings that made us, like elves were, that we can physically verify to be real. Therefore, our philosophy also revolves around what is good. Elves, on the other hand, need a philosophy for the psychological consequences of dealing with living hundreds of thousands of years without going insane. Humans, with our current philosophies, would probably. If life extension becomes more and more available, we're going to need a similar philosophy. Elves are driven to create, make, and do. They gain pleasure out of learning, discovering, exploring, and gaining knowledge. They also have a strong environmentalist streak because they can see the long-term consequences on nature that they have, and they have to live with it, which tempers their experimentation and invention. Elves also have a lot of time to do things. There is no rush to life. They have the ability to mentally cope with foregoing instant gratification at a level we can't even dream of. They know they will achieve what they want in the long run. However, they are also the first to act like children. Sam said they were as merry as children, and the next minute they could be somber and stern as a wizened old man. This dualism is how they are able to let out stress and still deal with the harsh realities of life. The amount of mental and emotional control needed to jump from a completely relaxed, open, expressive child to a somber, sober adult is intense. This indicates a training akin to Buddhism, where they can have complete control over their mind, and patience is something they have in spades, as they know they have centuries of time. They have learned to accept reality as it is. They have learned to face death head-on, and remain emotionally unattached to things in this world, as they see things live and die in what seems like an eye blink to them. But they can learn to enjoy it for the experience of it. Because of this, they have already accepted the concept of their own death, but do not idealize or dwell on it. Because of this and the fact that they know exactly what will happen to them when they do die, they can face death with nothing but grace and bravery, but they still have a lot to lose from death: the pain, the suffering, and the mental impacts of dying, the loss of interactions with friends and family. All of human religions and philosophies are made to deal with, explain, face, or even avoid death. Elves are way more certain about everything than we are. Though even if they knew they were just going to end up as worm food, and their memories and others were going to be the only things to live on, they would still have to maintain a very similar philosophy, and focus on how to deal with a long life, and less on focusing on death like we mortals do. Their philosophy would have to be something more akin to philosophical Taoism. Taoists believe that this is all we have, but they still focused on finding immortality. In Taoist religion, 8 great immortals figured it out, using meditation, drinking potions, mind over matter, never ejaculating, or if you were a woman, using the ejaculant of a man to gain life force from him. The philosophy, however, is much more about how to think about life and reality in a long-term preventative way, doing the least you have to achieve a great result, going with the flow of nature as opposed to fighting against it, like so many tried to do. Because of this mindset, careful observations of nature were made by them, and some of the most groundbreaking inventions of China were made by Taoists. Very much like elves, but elves exponentially more so. Because of this, they let the flow of the rest of the world do what it does. They impact it as little as possible unless they're forced to act, when they jump from merry children to somber lord in a heartbeat. This is why, as Frodo said, never go to elves for advice, they will say both yes and no. If they ever do give advice to mortals, it's closer to that of a psychological listening and helping a person get through their own thoughts, and weighing all the options, than telling them what they think. There is probably a lot more about philosophy of mind and other theoretical philosophy that they played with. Morality is so deeply ingrained they rarely have needed to question their own ethics, or it has been examined by them over the centuries, and in split-second decisions they rarely have to question their own ethics. And since they live so egalitarian, with such control over their emotions in their own minds, mental problems such as PTSD and sociopathy were unheard of. Only a few handfuls of elves were ever considered kinslayers, meaning they killed another of their species. The first one had his mother die and his father remarried, one of the few cases in Elvish history, so they were completely naive as to the impacts that it could have on someone psychologically and how to teach him to cope with it. He went on to emotionally manipulate a group of elves to slay their fellow elves in the heat of the moment, and they regretted it till their dying day. He was both addicted to his gems, the Silmarils, that had an effect akin to the One Ring, though not evil, and had himself been manipulated and taught by Morgoth, a master liar, when the Valar had naively released him on probation and allowed him to live among themselves and other elves. His children were also kinslayers, or contemplated kinslaying, when their vows they made proved stronger than their ethics. The other case had lived so isolated and antisocial with a father who was also like that he could not cope with being rejected by a woman who did not want him. With the prospect of living indefinitely as technology advances, we would need to embrace an immortalist philosophy or go crazy, and learn to live within the means on our planet long term, as we will have to be around to live in it. Just thinking about the concept can prepare us if somehow science does make death look weak and feeble in the decades and centuries ahead. It will prepare some of us who may want to live on to be ready to do what is needed to embrace the philosophies of immortalism, or, as I jokingly refer to it, Elvish paganism.